All right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, kids of all ages. Welcome back to Mr. Herring's fifth grade social studies. So excited to be here, continuing our Unit 2. Today, we're going to focus on the success of Jamestown. Recently, we discussed and talked about the failure and the problem of the first attempt at Jamestown, along with a short discussion of the failure of Roanoke, the mysterious failure of Roanoke, I should say. And today we're going to talk about what exactly happened to push Jamestown over the hump and make them the very first successful permanent English colony. Now, let's please remember this is 1607, not to be confused with St. Augustine, which was the first Spanish colony. Okay, now we're talking the English colony. When we think about the colonization of America, we generally forget about the Spanish because they were such a small piece and they didn't last very long. Yes, they came up through Texas, the early Spanish explorers, and covered a lot of the western lands and even some of the southern and southeastern lands. But they didn't last here very long. They pulled out really quickly. It wasn't quite their cup of tea, and they weren't interested in, I guess, investing in the land. So we don't talk about Spanish, but the Spanish were the first ones to colonize here with St. Augustine. But now we're going to talk about the English colony of Jamestown before we get into the other colonies. All right. So today, I can explain when, where, and why groups of people explored, colonized, and settled in the United States, including the search for religious freedom and economic gain. Now, this is a big one, religious freedom. That will be with us for the remainder of the unit and the next couple of units, leading all the way up until probably the Civil War. Even then, we're still talking about religious freedom. Um, and the EQs, which of the three G's is the main reason why the English came to Jamestown in 1607, and why did so many colonists die? Remember the three G's again. The three G's were the God, gold, and glory, and we kind of want to ask ourselves, which of the three G's, was it God, gold, or glory, that the English were looking for? All right. And we should know that based on my discussion with the failure of Jamestown in the last lesson. All right. Cool beans. Let's get started. So I'm going to show you a picture of a young lady. This is reconstruction of Jane, a 14-year-old young lady who was eaten during the starving time of 1609 and 1610. This is a very difficult time. And here's an unanswered question. Why on earth could this happen? Why on earth would this happen? Again, we have to go back to that ship log, the passenger list, which I'll show you here shortly, and kind of get some answers of why weren't they successful? And based on our discussions from Jamestown, we know. But this poor young lady, during this starving time, many people were starving to death and they were running out of food. They would eat leather, they ate their animals, they would eat vermin, rodents, whatever they could find. And eventually, once people started to die, rather than just burying their bodies, they would eat whatever meat they could get from those bodies. And believe me, there weren't very much meat at the time. They were very, very small, very thin, very skinny, muscle deprived, which is why they did die. And it probably wasn't very healthy for them, but they did eat each other, which was really horrible. This, of course, is before the second trip, when things kind of changed after John Smith came in and took over. So again, we visit that passenger log and we see some patterns. The patterns here is they didn't bring enough of one particular group, and that's this group right here. Now, we learned that in Jamestown, the failure was strictly because they were not interested in living. They were more concerned with finding gold. They didn't look for shelter. They didn't look for fresh water. They didn't look for the things that they needed in order to survive. And this was, in fact, the lead to their demise, to their failure. So Jamestown Colony was established in 1607. Uh, Great things were happening at that time. And I'm sorry, bad things happened at that time. It did not succeed. It wasn't until well after the second trip when things started to pick up. Here is a picture of Jamestown Colony, the Atlantic Ocean, and right in the middle here, you can see This is the Chesapeake Bay, which is what Jamestown would use to get their water supplies and things like this. Jamestown is this little dot right here. Okay, that's Jamestown, and it's off this little river pass here. They came up. It was a great place because they had access to the ocean. They could bring in their ships inland far enough to get safety from the big waves and things like that. Very, very, very good spot to land. And you see out here, this would be the the ocean, the water that we see, the Chesapeake Bay, and this is this right here, and this is that little inlet. The three boats, uh, some of the boats that landed here, not the three boats, but some of the boats that landed here, you can see their difference in size. On May 13th, 1607, the Susan Constant, Godspeed, and Discovery, carrying 144 sailors and settlers, will land and plant the first permanent English colony in North America, calling it Jamestown. Of course, they're naming it after their king, King James, King James the First, which is a big deal. That was very common. The Spanish queen and king would have towns and cities named after them, and duchess and dukes would have land named after them as well. The Jamestown colony notes, there's a page for you to print out in my Schoology page. You might want to get those if you can. If you can't get them, just watch the video here. Kind of pay attention. You might want to take notes for yourself. And then when you get back to class, of course, I can give you the note page. So let's talk about Jamestown Colony. Let's go ahead and get the notes done. Some details, some very important details. We have a laundry list of details. First, it was established in 1607 in what is now the city or the state of Virginia. Sorry, not the city, the state of Virginia. Jamestown Colony was considered the first successful colony of the English, even though the first attempt didn't go very well, but they did get it worked out and figured out. Jamestown was the first permanent English settlement in North America. As I said, another great detail, very important detail. Most who traveled to Jamestown did so for one reason: economic gain, such as finding gold and growing the cash crop, tobacco. It was heard that tobacco was being grown, and in fact, a young man named John Rolfe happened to get some tobacco seeds, which was extremely illegal. He left Florida with them, and the Spanish were very tight gripped on their stronghold on the tobacco crop. But John Rolfe was able to take a few of the seeds, brought them back to Jamestown and planted them. And that is kind of where things begin to get progressive and successful for Jamestown. But their number one reason for being here when they got to Jamestown was this right here. They were after gold. They wanted economic wealth. They wanted to get rich, which is why they died. And here's a great picture of tobacco plants in a tobacco field. It grew everywhere. Once it spread, everybody wanted some. Everybody grew it, and it became a gold mine, so to speak. Of course, many died in Jamestown, mostly due to starvation. They would drink terrible, disgusting water that was infected with diseases, and the warm southern climate. Most people were not prepared for the climate they found in Virginia. Now, you might see that Virginia is kind of northeast, but it is extremely humid and it is very, very warm. And the people from England and Europe were not used to that kind of weather. They were used to much colder, milder weather. And of course, disease would kick in, and many of them died. And they didn't go to waste, of course. Some of them would be eaten. Of course, it was kind of nasty. All right, government. Great detail here. The Jamestown colony was run by something called the House of Burgesses. This is a representative government. Now, if you remember, representative is a vocabulary term. That is a word of the discipline here. A representative is someone who is chosen to speak on behalf of others, right? And so we had a House of Burgesses where several people around the colony would send a person to speak on behalf of their little community or their small village or whatever it was. And they would meet every so often and they would discuss the problems that were going on in their little part of the colony. And of course, eventually, a man named John Smith would show up. Now, the John Smith that you saw in the Disney Pocahontas movie is not the John Smith who existed. John Smith was a very short man, not a very attractive man, but he became the primary leader of Jamestown. He kind of comes in and he just takes over. He's very much a leader. He's got a strong personality, and he put his foot down and told people, "We are going to survive whether you like it or not, and you're going to follow my rules, you're going to follow my lead." He improved the colony, and he also improved the relations with the Powhatans. He became friends with a young lady named Pocahontas, but like the movie says, John Smith uh, did not marry Pocahontas. In fact, she marries a man named John Rolfe, who is a much better looking man than John Smith. The Powhatans weren't really crazy about John Smith at first. They didn't have the greatest relationship with him. In fact, they were kind of negative relationships. At one time, they threatened to kill John Smith, or the legend goes, and Pocahontas kind of steps in and convinces her dad, who is the chief, to spare his life. And like I said, the relations with the Native Americans were generally negative, and they were quite violent. There were many fights. Many colonies died at the hands of the Native Americans because the Native Americans felt like they were being intruded on. Um, the colonists would take things from them. They felt they were stealing their food supply, the animals around them, and they were destroying the land, is what they thought, cutting down trees and things like that. So it didn't go very well. Um, between the Native Americans and the colonists. However, by the end, John Smith was able to settle things down a little bit, and eventually, so many colonists would show up and they would outnumber the Powhatans, and it was a moot point for them to fight back. Um, and so that was kind of the end of that. It was not the happy relationship that we'll learn about later on with Plymouth. All right. So those are the great details and a couple of patterns and maybe even a little vocabulary word in there concerning the Jamestown colony. Once you have all your notes taken, we'll put this in our journal. In the Schoology folder for Friday, you will find a little quick uh, Schoology assessment to sharpen and remind you of the important things that you'll need for the test. Please look at that, answer those questions, and submit that so that you don't fall behind. And I hope you enjoyed the story of the very quick and easy story of the first English settlement, Jamestown. See you guys later. Have a wonderful day.